we arrived in the middle of a typhoon, and we had been on our way and had to put down in Okinawa because it was so bad, and we were delayed coming, and they said, you must go. They have a big welcoming ceremony later on. So they put us in an Air Force jet and flew us to Taiwan, to Taipei. And when I got off of the plane, it was pouring down rain, and the rain was coming down off my nose and off my chin. And there on the tarmac, on the runway, were these lovely Chinese ladies and their husbands. They were placed where they were supposed to be to welcome us. And so I had learned one phrase, ni hao ma. That's the only phrase I knew. So I went down the line and said ni hao ma to each lady, and each one of them had water running off their faces from the rain. We went through that, the welcoming, and then my husband was, he went into an open Jeep, and he rode back and forth reviewing the soldiers who were there, soaking wet. But he was looking at the soldiers, doing a formal inspection. Then we went into the airport and began the journey up Yangmingshan to our quarters. It was raining and the wind was so bad, the rocks were coming down off of Yangmingshan onto the road, and our driver was going in between the rocks to get us up there. When we got up to the house, it was black, dark. There was no electricity. There was no furniture. There was a dog that had been left by the Admiral that my husband was replacing. And the dog was very upset with the storm. We walked into the quarters A, and all I could see was the form of a man, and he was up against the windows, and he was trying to put shutters up to protect us, and he put the shutter up and it would blow off and go down the mountain. But he was one of my husband's staff, and I met him that night for the first time. We had 3 straight chairs. We all sat in the 3 straight chairs. We had no lights. We had no food. We had a dog that was not very happy with us. And about that time, a roof tile, went through our guest room window and broke it. And all of my husband's briefcases were on the bed. And the rain came pouring in, and the briefcases were floating on the floor. And we all ran into the room, finally got it all taken care of. But the dog was so frightened that he grabbed a hold of the back of my heel, and he was holding on to my heel. And so I told my husband later, my first night in Taiwan, I'm cold, I'm wet, I'm hungry, and a dog bit me. So we started at the bottom, and we came up steadily from that time on. And I grew to love every inch of that house. And our staff, when I met the staff, they eventually came. But it was a very bad first day in Taiwan. My relationship with the Taiwan people, it was on many, many levels. In the quarters, I had a staff, and some of them were Taiwanese, some were from mainland China, and had come over, well, many years, 30 years before. I grew to know them, and we became used to each other. And as far as the people that I saw and was with often, they were mostly wives of my husband's, wives of men in my husband's command. And we met and had wives' luncheons and so forth, and enjoyed that, which is typical military type of thing. The Chinese ladies, I grew to love very much. They were so gracious and wonderful sense of humor. We had many times when we laughed and enjoyed. I had one very dear friend. Her name was Jean. She's a very elegant lady. One day she called me up and said, Pat, I know you like to do different things, so I'm going to the big market. Do you want to go with me? Mm-hmm. And I said, oh yes, I'd love to. So we went to the big market. She showed me all around this was downtown, all the different foods, and I was enjoying it so much. And she said, now we're going to go have lunch at a typical Taiwan restaurant. Working people go there, and you'll see how that. We walked in, and we went up to the second floor, very bare, just one light, a light bulb, sat down, and they brought me a little bowl of what I thought was just warm water. And so I drank the bowl of warm water. Then they brought me a bowl of white rice with a black chicken foot sticking up in the white rice. I had never seen this before. And I said to Jean, what do I do with that? And she said, oh, you eat it. And I said, no, I don't think I can. And so she said, well, if you don't eat it, it will hurt the feelings of the lady who owns this. And I said, Jean, I'll pass it to you under the table. So I passed it under the table, and she took it, and she was chewing on it like they do. And I looked at the table over next to us, and there was a very old man, and he didn't have any teeth, and he watched us, and he was laughing. He thought it was wonderful. But I couldn't do the chicken foot. But they took me, these lovely ladies, they took me so many places. There was a beautiful little fashion show at the Hilton, and we'd have lunch, and it was all very grand. And I really came to know them, because almost every night during the week, 5 nights a week, we went to official dinner parties. And the same people, pretty much. And I got to know them in many different aspects of them. I really loved them. I really did. And today I was shown a newspaper article that was written the day we left. We had to leave. And they quoted my husband as saying how he hated to leave Taiwan. And then they quoted me as saying, I leave a part of my heart here. And I really have. For all these 30 years, I've had a part of my heart here. Well, that's a sad one, because it would have to be the final days. When the treaty was broken, or was not renewed, and we ceased diplomatic relations with Taiwan, it was very bad times. The people were so afraid of what was going to happen. They anticipated mainland China invading them immediately, and they were so afraid. And so they let us know this. They stoned our quarters. They threw rocks at it. They pounded on the doors, and I was there alone with my little dogs, and they tried to make us understand that they were so terrified that we were going to go away and leave them defenseless and vulnerable. And I understood it later, but at the time I was just afraid. And that lasted for several days, and it was right before Christmas. And then everything stopped for the Americans. No parties, no gifts, nothing that we had done before. And finally, one day, the phone rang. And it was Queenie Yao. And she was one of my favorite ladies. She had a very fine position, high position in the government. And she called and said, Pat, it's Queenie Yao. And I said, oh, Queenie, I don't know what to say. I am broken-hearted. And Queenie said, I just called to tell you we love you. And then everything began. The gifts began to come, and the trees, the Christmas trees that the government sent us, the 2 big trees arrived. I got my driver, we piled our gifts in the car, drove all over Taipei and delivered the gifts. And it was as though the whole thing had changed. They understood that we were not responsible for what happened. I understood why they were so afraid. But that probably was the most memorable time because it never left me. I can talk about it now. It's as though I am there and going through it. Well, it was frightening, but then we had a little bit of protection there because our home was provided to us by China, by the Chinese of the Republic of China. So the students who were doing this, the rioters, were told you cannot damage the house because it belongs to the Republic of China. But they found ways to make us know they were there. And they did park the sound truck outside the gate, and it played Old Lang Syne hour after hour after hour. But I was a Navy wife, and I'd been through other situations that were frightening and had lived through it, so I just made up my mind, this too shall pass away, and it will become different, and it did. We resumed friendships, and when we left, we were made to feel like they really didn't want us to go. And not just because of the island and it being defenseless, but they really liked us and didn't want us to go. So that really was the most memorable thing I can remember. It had good sides to it as well as bad sides. I wouldn't know where to begin. I really wouldn't. To begin with, it's much bigger. The vitality, and I keep using that word, but I do it deliberately. It is so vital. These are people, to me, who have proven to themselves that they can do it by themselves. And so they are. And I am so proud of them. As far as the people and their attitude toward me, I see the same gentleness, the same kindness, the same deep respect that they always gave me. And I am amazed that after 30 years, this is how they still feel. It's wonderful to have the same feelings I had and still have them, and to find they do too. But it's an island that's going to be its own self. It can take care of itself. However, the United States will always have that protective feeling about Taiwan. It'll never be without us completely.